a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Hey, welcome back. We are here today with 5 tips that you will need to help you win your fantasy football drafts in 2023. All right, let's get into it. The number one thing you're going to want to do, the first thing I guess I should say you're going to want to do, not the number one, is your research. You really need to know all the top players' targets and touch counts is so important because of how important opportunity is. I always say opportunity is king. I want a guy who's touching the ball more almost every single time. Obviously, how much they're doing with their touches matter a lot, but it's the NFL, so if a guy's not producing, typically they're not going to get the touches. So you want a guy with a high touch count if possible. So you want guys with higher touch counts, and touches are king. You need to know where everybody's going. You're going to have a lot of moves in the off season. I know a lot of this hasn't happened yet. We'll do another video later on when some more stuff happens, but you need to know where everybody's going. You need to know where coaches are going. You need to know where players are going, who's getting drafted, and kind of what schemes they're kind of running for the players that they currently have / are getting in. You need to know not just total season stats either, because although targets and touches are important, it's way more important on a per game basis. Somebody like Breece Hall versus somebody like Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott pretty much stayed pretty healthy most of the whole season, so his stats are going to be a full season long, while Breece Hall's is only around 6 games. They're probably pretty close in stats, actually, even though Zeke got an entire season in and Breece Hall only got 6 games in. But when you're looking in your stats, it's not necessarily going to jump out at you that he only played 6 or 7 games. It's going to jump out at you that their totals are pretty close to similar. So you're going to want to know how many times they played and not just total season stats. You want to know each team's, out of all 32 teams, because you have a chance of really getting anybody from any team, unless there's certain teams that you're just like, I don't want a player from them no matter where they go at. And that's somewhat understandable too. But any team that you're targeting any way, shape, or form, you need to know what their strength of schedule is. You don't need to necessarily know for every position group. Like next year, I'm not going to go after maybe, let's say, Atlanta's quarterback situation likely. So I don't have to know Atlanta's quarterback strength of schedule, but I would need to know their going against running backs and receiver strength of schedule, because there's possibility of me picking up a Tyler Algier, Cordero Patterson, a number of the wide receivers possibly, especially if they get a decent one drafted in, maybe a quarterback drafted in. That could actually be a thing, but we'll see more as the season gets closer. But you're also going to want to really know your league's scoring system. So most fantasy football leagues have a slightly different scoring system. There is a Prairie standard scoring system, which I'm going to say is a full point PPR, 4-point quarterback touchdown, 25 yards for a quarterback passing 1 point. That kind of league with your 1 flex, 1 tight end, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, quarterback. But you have some leagues that do 6-point quarterback touchdowns. You have some leagues that do heavier for the passing. A league I'm in, if a quarterback gets 300 passing yards, he gets a 2-point bonus. If he gets 400 passing yards, he gets another 4. So if he gets 400 passing yards, it's a 6 points in total bonus points. That's huge for players, for a player like Patrick Mahomes versus a player like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is still going to be awesome because of his rushing stats. But if for some reason the passing was heavily favored, what if your passing for a quarterback is just as much as running, then Jalen Hurts isn't so far ahead and away of everybody else because, it's just, you need to know what your scoring system is to determine who's actually going to hold value in your leagues. All right, we're going to move on to number 2. The second thing that you want to do in your fantasy this year before the draft starts, in order to help you, is going to be to mock, and mock some more. Now, there's a few different ways of looking at mocking. For me, I like to do free leagues for mocks instead of necessarily mocking. I feel like it's a lot more accurate of what people are willing to actually do in a real draft compared to mocks where people typically quit after the first couple of picks and maybe before even. You don't typically get a full amount of people for the entire draft. Even in free leagues it doesn't happen as much, but you get a lot more accurate assessment of the first half of the draft than a typical mock would be. So I personally like doing my free leagues that I either might kind of pay attention to, but typically I'm not. It's a free league, so I kind of don't mind giving up on them fully. You also, during your mocking, it gives you a chance to try out different things. So I know I like to go running back heavy at the beginning of my drafts. But during my mocks, I might do a 0 running back strategy. I might go tight end early. I might see what it looks like if I go early wide receiver. I might try all different kinds of things because I'm just mocking and I get to kind of see how my team would play out if I did that strategy. You're also sitting there and you're not just getting an idea of what your team could look like, but you're getting an idea of where everybody's going at in these drafts. You're getting an idea of ADPs. And likely when you're mocking, or even your free league mocking, whatever you want to call it, those teams are going to typically look a lot better than what your real team looks like. I don't know if that's because, more people in free leagues are willing to kind of do some BS kind of stuff, or if just my friends are that good at drafting. So you typically want to pay attention to the players' ADP of the players that you don't draft. If you're only paying attention to who you like, and you're like, all right, well, this guy goes around here and this guy goes around here, one of your buddies might also think similar to what I'm saying, and he might jump on the ADP and be like, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm going to go a round early on this guy, or I'm going to go 2 rounds early on this guy, and your buddy's got the couple picks before you and he takes them, and you're like sitting there, I don't know what to do now because he took my guy. This is where you gotta be able to remain flexible, and you gotta be able to know where the other players are at that are going in ADP similar, I guess, to what. So if you have a backup guy, you could take him maybe, or you could know that his ADP's a lot later, and you could maybe take a different guy now and take him later. So knowing ADPs is important. It's always kind of a gamble because your friends could go before ADPs. They could go well before ADPs. So ADPs aren't end all be all, but it is a good thing to know typically where guys are going. We're moving on to number 3, third thing you want to do in order to win your fantasy draft. That's going to be to prepare a strategy. Like I said, I like to go running back early and heavy. But if you're going to go 0 running back, you're going to go balanced offense, you're going to go all running back, you're going to go strangling any position group in general. You're going to want to know what you're going to want to do ahead of time before getting into the league. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be an end-all be-all. If you go running back early, heavy, and you wanted this guy, and this guy, and you're looking at ADPs thinking, I can definitely do this. You take your first running back, and now your next two guys that you should have been able to end up going earlier than their ADPs, and you're sitting there like, well, I still want to go running back, but I don't love these guys. That's where you got to be flexible, because if you don't love those guys, go ahead and shift gears slightly. You don't have to go with whatever your guaranteed strategy is going in if it starts falling apart. That's where the be flexible comes in. And not every position's created equal. So I know I'm talking about a running back a lot, but running back is one of, if not the most important position in fantasy football, which is why almost every single year the number 1, 2, 3 picks are always running backs. Because the difference between, the group size of fantasy relevant running backs is so small. And it's so much, like, each team typically, there's 32 teams, each of them only has typically one fantasy relevant running back, if that. Some of them have 2, but most of them typically only have 1. Receivers, a lot of teams have 2. Some of them have 3. So it's just a lot more players to choose from. And then when you look at tight ends, they're a position group that doesn't score a lot. And I think they're somewhat irrelevant unless you have one of the top guys. Which is why the top guys are worth going after in those early rounds, because they're so important. But you definitely need to figure out what you're going to do, stick with that plan, be flexible with the plan if need be, and it's okay to try different things, Typically the top picks that you're going to get, you're going to want to keep those for your guaranteed studs, or at least in your mind, your guaranteed stud. Anybody could get hurt at any given time, so guaranteed is a loose term, but you really want to use your top picks to solidify the base foundation of your team for a solid point total. Same thing with the first few rounds, really. But then when you start getting into the middle rounds, into the later rounds, you can kind of take your swings at the fence. You can take your guys that you think are going to be sweet and could win you a championship. And you also really want to know who's drafting around you. Because like me, I'm a running back drafter, and my buddies know this. So they know that if my pick is coming up, it's likely going to be a running back. It just is. Almost every pick. Like, I like, at least early on in the drafts, I like taking my running backs. So you got to know who's drafting around you, know kind of what their strategy is, at least in years past. And you can always change it up. Like this year, I went more balanced. I typically go all running back, but I switched it up a little bit this year to try to kind of throw a little wrench in it. But you also really want to print out any notes, ideas, strategies that you have that might help you remember when come draft day. We're going to move on to our fourth thing, which is preparing your body. This is a really, I think, underappreciated and underdone thing when it comes to preparing for your fantasy draft, is preparing your body. You want to make sure you get a good night's sleep. You want to make sure you're not getting too fucked up the night of or the night before, really. You really want to kind of have more of a sound mind and body. That includes eating well. You want to get yourself a good breakfast, lunch, or whatever, depending on when you're drafting. You want to eat well beforehand so you're not weighed down, thinking about other things while you should be thinking about your fantasy football team. You want to exercise a little bit, again, going with the making your body feel a little bit better. You want to get the blood pumping a little bit, get it going, get your mind going, get really think about what you're doing, and getting yourself into test mode almost, which is another thing that you want to do. You almost want to treat it like a test. Bring a mint. Your teachers always used to give you mints, at least mine did, before testing, and it's supposed to kind of like get the brain going, get it kind of thinking and moving around. So you almost want to treat it like a test. Bring them in, eat well, sleep well, get your body really prepared for that. And that moves us on to our fifth and final tip in order to help you win your fantasy draft this year, and that is to execute your strategy when it comes draft day. You really want to know what your plan is going in while remaining flexible just in case. And you also want to have more than, you got your guys, you got your coming up, you got your guys coming up and you're sitting there and you're going, I really want this guy, I really want this guy, I really want this guy. And then he goes one pick ahead of you or two picks ahead of you and you're like, what am I going to do? If you already had 2 or 3 or 4 guys mentally queued in your mind, you can still go, I wish I had that. But ultimately my buddy got him and now I'm on to the next one. So instead of I have to completely regroup and think, I got a couple more guys to go, should I go this way or this way? I'm between one or two. Maybe I'm only really got one here. And then I'm like, you know what? This is the guy that I need on my team because I've already queued him up in my mind. The other guy's gone. He's out of my mind. He's gone. And I'm going to take my guy. And don't be afraid to jump ADPs because, like I said a second ago, you got your buddy who took him two picks before, or two literal picks right before you got it. You could have taken him last round most of the time. I mean, unless it's the first round, you could have taken him last round. So don't be afraid to jump ADPs to get your guy. Don't think that your guy is guaranteed going to get to you because of where he goes in ADPs. But at the same time, you don't really want to overreach. You're not, you got a Ramondre Stevenson from this year. Oh, I love him. He's my guy, and he's going to be a top 10 running back. Well, you're right, but you still don't want to draft him as a first-round pick. He's going in the 9th, 10th ADP. You don't have to jump that early. If you really want to get him early, go get him in the 6th. Go get him in the 7th. Don't jump to a top 5 pick just because he could go there and should go there, and he will likely go there next year. But the ultimate thing for winning any fantasy draft is going to be finding value in your players. Every year, Christian McCaffrey could end up being the number 1 guy or whatever, or like these guys that are up top stay up top. And that's where a lot of the luck of the draw comes in when it comes to draft order and when you guys are picking your draft orders. But it's the later guys. It's the guys your buddies don't pick. It's those, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 round pick. Those guys that really win you your fantasy leagues because just about everybody's going to get studs up top unless a couple injuries happen here and there. That sucks. All different kinds of things in that way could happen, but the main thing is that you really want to find value in your players. And the best way, and the really only way to win every single fantasy draft, guaranteed, is by looking at it as the way to win is to have fun. And if you can go there and you can go hang out with your buddies, I know not every single one of you, especially since COVID's been around, has been able to live draft. Not every league live drafts either. But I know a couple of my leagues like to live draft, and it is one of my favorite times of the year is getting together with all my buddies and having a drink, having a smoke, maybe playing some bags, go jump in a pool, hang out at Marky Mark's house in the Funky Funk Bunch, just hanging out with all the friends and having a good time. That's the real way to win any fantasy football draft. And I am Scott Fenner. I am the Fantasy Football Plug, signing out. By the way, first time with a real camera. Let's see, how does it turn out? Pretty good or no? Y'all let me know.